Hello everybody, welcome to yet another podcast from arunrocks.com. This time we are going to cover a topic that has been requested by many of you. It is test-driven development in Django 1.6. We'll not only talk about test-driven development and the concepts behind it, we'll also create a hands-on project which is building a URL shortener like Bitly, and we'll talk about some of my ideas around test-driven development. So what we're going to cover today is a brief description about test-driven development. Most of my detailed comments and thoughts about test-driven development, what are its advantages, where do you think it's applicable, and things like that have been covered in my blog post in arunrocks.com, which accompanies this podcast. So if you're interested in greater detail about the theory and the ideas behind test-driven development, I suggest you read the blog post. We'll also talk about how you can follow the steps of test-driven development, and we'll actually do a project or a hands-on in test-driven development by creating URL shortener using Django. We'll also have a quick example about how we can do refactoring, how we can do bug fixing, all within the constraints of or within the framework of test-driven development. Test-driven development is, very simply speaking, a technique for building software that, as the name suggests, guides software development by writing tests. So it is first you write tests and then you develop for satisfying those tests, not the other way around. It's not actually doing the development and coding and then writing the tests. Test-driven development asks you to write the tests first and then actually do the development. So this is likely to be a very different way of developing code for most of us. It's slightly counterintuitive, but as you'll see, it's quite common in the software development world today. The concept was introduced in 1999 and probably known before that as well. As a part of extreme programming, it became quite popular, and test-driven development has become a mainstream way of developing software today. How to do test-driven development? In very simple steps, like an algorithm. If I were to describe it, it's like decide what the code will do. This is usually built using user stories or having a conversation with the client and jotting down some bullet points and identifying based on your experience what the core functionality is, and agreeing with the customer or the client. Writing a test. So this is the key part. You had to write the test first, and the test would not pass initially because there is no code to support that test. So the next step is running the test, and it will definitely fail because there is no code written yet. And the next step is, of course, writing the code so that the test will pass. So the important thing here is you just write enough code so that the test would pass, not anything more, not anything less. And next step is running the test. If by any chance it fails, you have to go back to the previous step and correct your code or write some more code. This process continues until the test pass. Once the test pass, you actually refactor the code if required to make the code much better. And the important thing to notice is, as you refactor the code, you keep running the tests to ensure that it doesn't break any of the tests. So you can fearlessly refactor the code without worrying if you'll break any old functionality, because the tests which are existing will actually take care of not breaking any existing code. And rinse and repeat. So this process keeps going on until you have completed your entire backlog of user stories or features. And as the process indicates, this is very much driven by tests, hence the name test-driven development. There's another name for it which I'm not very fond of. It's called red-green-clean process, or it's also known as RedGreenRefactor. So as you noticed in the previous steps, the tests would actually show red if they fail, and first you'll definitely see red, and then you keep working, or then you keep coding until you see green, and finally you do the refactoring, that is the clean. So it's kind of an encapsulation of the entire process itself when you say red, green, clean. Next, we'll move on to the hands-on part of this podcast, where we actually require a minimum of Django 1.6 and Python 2.7. The reason I say this is because there are a couple of differences in Django 1.6 which I have made use of, and Python 2.7 actually use an improved unit test module, which was not there in Python 2.6 or any versions before that. So the minimum requirement for continuing, if you're following along. Okay, so let's start the hands-on part of test-driven development with Django. As you know, we are going to build a URL Shortener website, and before we start coding, we need to understand what the requirements are. So some of the features which are expected out of the site are the follows. So the first one is the short URL must be smaller than the original URL. That is a basic requirement. Second one is, if you give the short URL, you should be able to recover the long URL, which is basically mapping from the original URL to the short URL and back. The third one is the home page must have a form so that you can enter the long URL. And the second one is, the fourth one is, if you submit this form, you should be able to get the short URL as is expected in a site like this. And finally, if you click on the short URL, if you give the short URL to your users, they must be redirected to the original URL without any user interface or without actually visiting our site. So some people call these user stories. You can call this features. You can call it one-line descriptions of your requirements, anything. Let's start with the actual code. Now we are just going to create a new project, and I'm going to call this tiny for tiny URLs. So we go to tiny, and since manage.py is already executable, you just need to start the application. I'm going to call this application short URLs. So now you have a short URLs application or an app in Django terms created. Now you need to create the tests as the first step of test-driven development. Before that, let's take care of some settings. Let's go to the project folder, and there should be a settings.py. Let's create some SQLite database for our testing purposes, SQLite 3, and we're going to call it some name like database.db. And one more setting we need to take care of is the installed application. So we're going to add short URLs here. So it'll be our main application. And let's run syncdb so that the models are actually created. Now you don't need to actually do this, but I'm just going to add the admin access password, the admin user account. Now let's add the first test case. So if you remember, this is our requirement. So I have already created a ready-made test case, and since our app already has a test, so if you go to short URLs, you can actually find test.py with some boilerplate content. This is a very basic test that test nothing, just an addition. So I'm going to replace this with our first test case. The first test case tests the first user story, which is that the URLs get shorter. Just going through line by line, we have a simple URL called example.com. I'm going to create a link object which I'm going to import from models, and this link object is going to be shortened by passing it to a class method called link.shorten. The shorten URL will be a string, and I'm going to compare the length of this with the length of the original URL. So I'm going to use assert less, which is one of the properties defined by the unit tests module which comes with Python. There will be a lot of assert a lot of functions which start with assert, which can test for equality, which can test for truth, falsehood, greater than, lesser than, containers, a containment, which is basically membership within a list or membership within the presence of a key within a dictionary, and so on and so forth. So all these are basically replacements for the standard assertions that you could expect. And there are some more assertions added by Django itself. So let's see if this first test runs correctly. I wouldn't expect to. Short URLs. So it says that it cannot import the name link. So this is the first failure that we face, and this is perfectly normal. This is expected. We are going to models, and we are going to add that missing object, which is the link object. Now I'm going to replace this with our link object, which contains nothing but one field, which is the URL field, and one static method which is returning a single character string, which is h. Now this is actually cheating. I'm going to ensure that the test passes by just sending a one character string. I can possibly send an empty string as well, and I'm sure that the test would pass because it's not going to check whether the shortened URL is correct or not. That's the next one, and this is perfectly valid when you're doing test-driven development, because the objective, as you remember, is to write just enough code so that the test passes. So this is possibly the right thing to do in such scenarios. Now just going back to our terminal and running the test. As you can see, the test has passed. I prefer to see a more verbose list test output. So I'm going to say -v2, and it says the test shortens is okay. So congratulations, your first test passes, and you're well on your way for the first iteration of test-driven development. Now one thing to note here is that we have used a particular assertion here called assert less. We have to find out from the documentation the different kind of assert statements. I explain more about this in the blog. We have to be very, I would say, creative, or I would say very careful in selecting the appropriate assertion. If you make a very general assertion, you'll get a simple error message which says that the assertion failed. You'll not know what is failing, what is the real condition which is being checked. If you use the appropriate one like assert less, it will actually tell you what is failing, what is greater than the other in this case, and why it is not correct according to this test. So moving on, we are going to add the next test, which is that we should recover the original URL from the short URL, and that looks something like this. So here what we are doing is we are going to test that the URL is saved this time. So if you notice, we did not save the link model or the link instance in the previous test. It was simply not required. And whenever you can skip touching the database, I would recommend doing that because it saves time. And every time you save running tests is actually the time gained, and it'll actually encourage you to run tests more. So try to make your tests run as quickly as possible, make them as short as possible. And here I'm saving it for the simple reason that usually the expansion is asked for in that link, and not necessarily at the same time. It's asked at a later point in time when another user sends the short URL, or the same user sends another request. So it's important that you save it, create a database entry, and then you expand it. So once you expand it, the test makes an assertion whether the URL which you originally started with the expanded URL is the same as the original URL you started with. So let's see if this test runs. It should fail, as it's failing now. Now we have to really create a proper model or a proper mapping between the long URL and the short URL. We cannot get away with a cheat like this. So for this to work, I need to tell you how a URL shortening service generally works. What usually happens is that a URL is mapped by a lookup table by such sites into something which is uniquely identifying that URL, say a number. And then whenever you ask for a short URL, it gives you that number. And whenever you give that short URL, the same website gets called and it's able to reverse lookup from that number back to your original URL. So if you take the example of Django, every URL gets created and saved on the database as a link object, and you need a unique number to identify that link object so that you can do this reverse lookup. And we are lucky in this case because Django automatically creates a unique number called the primary key, which is the .id of the link instance. So let's leverage that knowledge to create expand a better shorten and expand method. So I'm going to replace whatever we have written with that. So now we have a shorten which actually does nothing but create a link object. In case that link object is already created for that URL, it's not necessary to create it again because we'll have duplicates and we already have a short URL created. So it'll just retrieve that link object for you. And the next step is to create a primary key which is already there and to return that primary key in the form of a string. Expand does the reverse. It actually takes the primary key in the form of a string. It converts it into a number, an integer, and it uses that as the primary key lookup, and it returns you that URL in the form of a long string, that long URL string. So once you do that, I think our test should be working or passing. Yes, it does. So this is a very quick way of explaining how it worked. In real life or in real development, you would actually go through the process of defining these functions, and probably you'll have some error messages, and you'll have to actually debug it with a debugger to find out what went wrong. So you'll insert some print statements, or probably you'll take your debugger like PDB, or the one I like is PUDB, and you'll probably step through the code, or you'll insert a breakpoint at one of the places where it's breaking, where you think is the problem, and you go through it. I've skipped all that. I've shown you what the code is which makes this test run. So essentially we are through with the second test. Now we are ready for the third test, which checks if the home page is resolved correctly, and it shows a form. So this is the function, this is the test case that does that. Essentially it does a reverse lookup for the name home. So I could have just said self.client .get, and it actually takes the URL which is mentioned here, but I have used a named URL here so that it is more independent of whatever URL structure that you might have in the future. You can possibly change it in the future as well. So this is a good practice. And once you get the page, once you retrieve the page using self.client.get, you're comparing the response code with the OK response code, which is code number 200. The next line actually checks for the presence of a variable called form in the response.context. Please mind that this is not response.content. We are talking about the context variables, and I'm expecting a context variable called form, which actually stands for the form which is returned by the view. So we haven't defined reverse yet. Let's define that as well, and let's run the test. So now when you run the test, it fails. So obviously we are not having a view which shows you the home page. Now since in the spirit of test-driven development we need to write the minimum amount of code, we're going to create a view which is based on a Django generic view or a class-based view. So let's open the views.py, and let's utilize one of the Django generic views here. So I'm going to use the create view here because that's the most appropriate one, which actually shows a form, which actually creates the link object, and which pretty much does what we want in this particular test. And I'm importing link so that I can refer to the model as link, and I'm careful to only show one field here, which is the URL field. Once I do that, I know that there is going to be a corresponding template that needs to be created. So let's go to the let's create the folder structure for adding templates. So I'm going to say shortcuts, templates, and I'm going to create shortcuts folder inside templates to say that this is for that particular application, and I'm going to say make that directory. So once I do that, I can go ahead and create a template inside it, which should be of the correct name in case I'm not mentioning the name, which I'm not mentioning here. So the default name is going to be link_form.html. So I'm going to create that. So the contents could be very simple for this. So I'm just going to create the form here, and the form is the standard form you would expect for Django. I'm going to say form as P, and I'm going to have a submit button which just says shorten the URL, and I'm going to save that. Now the next thing I need to do is connect this view with the urls.py. So I'm going to open tinyurls.py, and as you would notice, it would have some existing content with something commented out. I'm going to replace this with what we need. Which is the home page URL. So here I'm going to import link create, and I'm going to use that as the view. And ideally everything should be fine at this point in time. I'm going to run the test. So it says the template does not exist. Probably I did not save it. It says here shortcuts link form not found. Short URLs link form not found. So okay, I called it shortcuts, which is the wrong name. Probably I should change that. And hopefully the test should run now. Yeah. So we are through with 3 test cases now. At this point in time, we have a home page with a form, and this is actually going to create a particular link object if you submit it. But not so fast. Let's see if that test case, which is our next test case, actually runs, which is nothing but creating this particular link object if you submit the form. So I'm going to quickly add that. Now if you go through this, you can see that a short URL is created. You're going to post that particular form using self.client.post to the same URL, which is the home page, and you're going to submit with a URL with a dictionary containing the URL parameters, and it's going to follow any redirect links, which is basically what Django does when it redirects, submits a form and redirects. You're going to check if after the redirection the status code is okay, which is 200, and you're going to check if the short URL that you expect from here is actually present in the content, which could be an HTML or which could be just something plain. So once you add that test, we're going to run it, and it's going to fail. So now what we need to do is we need to ensure that there are 2 things, which is there is a page which shows the URL and the short URL and the link details, which is nothing but we can in the spirit of writing minimum code again, a generic view called detail view provides. So we're going to do that, we're going to add a detail view. And we're going to import it as well. And just as we did before, we are going to wire it up in our urls.py. So we have done that. Now we have the URL link show, the view link show, which is basically mapped to a URL which says starts with link slash and a number, which is going to be our destination, which is going to show what is the number which is mapped to that particular URL, and then we are going to say link show. So that is the name of the URL. So this should take care of showing the detail. So after the form gets submitted, now we should also show, we should also define what template needs to be created for that. Once again, it has a naming convention, so we're going to call it link_detail.html, and this is going to be very bare as well. It's going to show a short link, which is nothing but /r/object.id, and the original link, which is object.url. So once we have taken care of showing that, we need to ensure that the form gets it's not saved in the correct directory. link_detail.html. Okay, so now we have to ensure that the form gets redirected correctly. So for that, we have a couple of ways to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to define the get absolute URL function or method in models. So go to models, and I'm going to add that particular function here so that it gets redirected correctly. So it does a reverse URL mapping. It shows the it takes the link show, which is the detail view. It passes the primary key, and it gives you the correct reverse lookup. So now if the form is submitted, it should go to the correct URL. So here I think patterns is not defined, error comes, which is probably because I didn't include that import. I think I deleted that. Now another error which comes this time in models. So as you imagine, errors are part of test-driven development, so there is nothing to be worried about. It's actually normal when you have errors in test-driven development. So that's taken care of, and we run the test again. So what I did right now is I actually paused the video and did some debugging, and while I did that, I found a couple of problems with the test that I had created. So the original test had no check for the URL equality, so I changed the test quite a bit, and I also changed the URL, which said that it is example.com initially without the trailing slash, and now it has a trailing slash. I'll explain in a moment why. So another change I made is that I actually look for the link object in the response context. I take that link object and then I shorten the URL rather than doing this all at the beginning for the URL at the beginning, so that I have the same link object instead of another link object which might have been created. And then I check for equality. Now if I go back to the models, you can see that if I go back to the views, you can see that I have added a form valid here. So what used to happen is every time the create view submits a new submits the form, a new link would be created, and this would not be acceptable to the test case, because the test case is actually looking for the original URL being created and the URL matching the primary key of the first link object. So what I'm doing here is very simple. I'm actually looking for the existence of the same URL. I'm going to redirect, if that URL already exists, I'm going to redirect you to that particular detail view which has that same which has the primary key of that existing URL, or else I'm going to continue as usual and call the parent form valid, and everything goes on as usual. So here what is happening in the test case is I'm actually picking the link object from the response context and looking for equality. So once I did all these changes, I can see that the test case is run properly, and the fourth test case also runs fine. So let's march on. Let's continue adding test cases. Now the last test case and the final test case should actually check if the redirection works. Let's do that now. So here what is happening is I'm actually creating a short URL here, and I'm going to check if the reverse redirection URL works, which I haven't created so far, the redirect short URL, and I'm going to check if the redirected short URL is the same here. So I think this should be redirecting to the URL here. Let's check that. Let's run the test now. So it says here that the short URL arguments don't match. So if I go back to views, I had to create a view for the redirection. I'm going to use another class-based view, as you must have guessed from the pattern here, called redirect view. Redirect view is probably the best or the most appropriate one to use here. I'm just going to import that, and as you can see here, I'm just overriding the URL, the final destination URL, which is picked up as the keyword argument here from the URL pattern. I'm going to expand the URL pattern and ask the link object, the link class, to expand it, and just return that. And it's not a permanent redirection. Of course, if you make it a permanent redirection, all the URLs from in the future would be taken to that. It's more like a soft redirection, so I prefer to keep it not permanent. The next change I had to make is in urls.py. So here I'm going to include the view over here, and I'm going to add the URL pattern, which makes sure that the view is connected. So as you can see here, this is the name of the captured short URL which is passed on to the generic view. So now let's run the test, and again it's passing. So we have all the tests which were initially told to us from the customer, all the 5 user stories passing now, and the next part of this tutorial would be to check how we can refactor while we have these tests preventing us from regressing into older mistakes, or preventing us from regressing away from these features. Now what you would notice for all these URLs is that these URLs are actually created based on the primary key. If I go to models, you can see that the shortened URL is nothing but the string of the primary key, which are just integers. I want to make use of all the characters from A to Z, both lowercase and uppercase, in encoding the primary key. So it's generally called as a base conversion, just like hexadecimal characters have those extra 6 A to F. If you include all the characters which I just mentioned, it'll be something like a higher base, maybe base 62, I think, I'm not sure. Once you do that, or 72, once you do that, you can actually make your URLs even more shorter than simply using integers or decimals. So for that I'm going to use a module called base changer, so that I can put it's like a utility module where I can include put all these functions that I need, and I'm going to save this as my new file. And then I'm just going to change my entire models.py to make sure that these two functions are called. I'll explain in a moment where the changes are. So as you can see, the shorten now looks slightly different. There is a call to decimal to base n, and I'm going to pass the primary key, and then I'm going to use that as our new primary key. As our short URL, and similarly the expand does the inverse, which takes the number or the URL and converts it into a number, which is nothing but our primary key. So in order to check if this works, all I had to do is to run the test once again. So as you can see, all the 5 test cases pass without any problem. So this worked because I was not writing a test case which went into details of how the format of the short URL is. So that leaves the implementation of the short URL free for changing. Generally, this is a good practice. If you are going to write a test case, don't put a lot of implementation related details into your test.py or into your test cases. That gives you the freedom to change the implementation just like we did right now. One more thing you would notice is that our template has not changed to showing the new kind of URLs. For example, if I go to link detail, you would notice that it still shows the object.id, which is not true anymore. So I'm going to change that as well to a new template which shows the short URL, which is nothing but captured from here, which is the object primary key reverse mapped into the redirect short URL. So I'm going to run the test here, and that works fine as well. Another thing that happens in test-driven development is all your test cases are fine, but you have some bugs which are logged in by the user, and when those bugs are logged in, you have to ask for a test case to replicate those bugs. So in this particular implementation of what we have done so far, you notice you might have noticed that there is a subtle bug, and this happens only in certain URLs, only after a certain number of URLs have run. So if you notice, all our tests so far are just creating one URL and deleting the database after that, because in the next test case the database would be wiped clean. So most of the time the primary key would be 1 or 2 or single digits. So this particular problem or bug happens when there are more than say 50 or 40 different URLs already generated by this site. So just to ensure that that test case is replicated here, I'm going to add a test case which creates multiple short URLs, the one over here. So this takes this creates some random URLs. So I'm going to import random and string as well, and it does it a certain number of times. Let's say it does it 100 times, and it just creates a random number of ASCII characters, creates a URL based on that, and it actually creates the URL and shortens the URL and expands it back and finds out whether it's same as before. So once we do that, we can actually run the test and check. So here you can see that there is a certain error which happens on the 55th URL which is generated, and it's kind of not matching the 42nd. Ideally both sides should match, and this is a bizarre error which takes you to a debugger, and I'm not going to take you through all the debugging steps, but once you do the debugging, you'll narrow down to the actual problem, which is in our newly added module, which is page changer. So if you notice, the 55th character here, or the 42nd for that matter, is not a unique character. It's actually U, which happens again in the 55th character. So this was the error, and it caused a collision of short URLs. Now, how do you solve this? Once you find the error, it's very easy to solve it. All you have to do is probably rely on a less error-prone or typo-prone method of creating these characters. Just use the string module, just combine the digits, the lowercase ASCII characters and the uppercase ASCII characters, and just run the test again, and it looks like you're good to go. So this was a very quick tutorial of how you can do test-driven development in Django. I hope you enjoyed it. Just so that you can see how the site looks like, since we haven't seen it so far, just going to do a sync db and run server. And now the server should be running, and I'm going to do copy that link address, paste it here. So you'd be asked for a URL, and you can give any URL here and shorten it, and you can see that there is a shortened URL and the original URL, and if you click on this, it should go to that URL, whichever it is. So test-driven development, according to me, is a very powerful way of developing code. The only problems are that it takes a little bit of time to get comfortable with, because it's slightly counterintuitive, and you have to wear the coder hat and the tester hat, which have two different objectives. The coder hat tries to build, the tester hat tries to build a test case that breaks your code, and the coder hat tries to fix everything and make sure that it's not breakable. So two different extremes. It's not really ideal for exploratory programming where you're not sure what you're going to do and you just want to run some scripts, but it's very good for production quality code. So once you're happy with the first exploration or the first version of your code, I would strongly recommend you to create the second version onwards in test-driven development, so that your design is much better, your code is much more cleaner. So remember, test-driven development is for design purposes more than testing purposes, and it is going to make your code much more maintainable in the future. Thank you.